Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again, this time going back 20 years to cover the debut album from British prog rockers Pure Reason Revolution. It is finally covering the Dark Third here at the Metal Exchange, something I've wanted to do since we started this podcast. But before we talk all things PRR, how are you, my friend?
Very good. I'm excited to talk about this album, and I'm glad that you chose it, because for years I've had both you and our friend Caleb tell me how good this album is, and I just, I'd probably listened to it a handful of times, but it's one of those albums that I think really deserves a deep dive, and this podcast, it provides the perfect format for that. So I was able to listen to it, about half dozen times, and I feel like I really, ingested it in a way that I hadn't in the past. So I'm glad you chose it.
I think I've listened to this album 1,000 times, and I'm not sure that I fully ingested it at this point, because it is so different than just about everything else we've ever talked about. But we'll get there. Lots of new stuff has been coming out fast and furiously, and I just wanted to mention a couple of things that I was checking out this week. First and foremost, Goliath, the new album from Exodus, is out. It's been getting some good reviews. Rob Dukes, the vocalist who was with the band for about a decade in the early 2000s, is back. With Exodus, I think you kind of know what you're going to get, but I thought it was a really solid release from them. When you're wanting to scratch that thrash itch, they do a very, very nice job. So check out Goliath. Moving over to Sweden, a band called Evermore came out with their third album called Mournbraid. Typical fast power metal that I guess most bands would liken to a Halloween or an Axon Star or something like that. I thought their new album was really, really good. Again, it's called Mournbraid. It came out just about a week ago. And moving away from the thrash and the power metal, going to a more progressive style, a band out of Italy, which has been around for quite some time. Their debut album came out in 2012. I don't remember it at all, but I did check out their new album called Semper Tequi, and the band is called Inner Vitriol. They're from Bologna, Italy. Fantastic album. I'm going to go back to this one. Shades of Dream Theater, shades of a little bit of Soen in spots, just modern prog done very, very well. Really catchy stuff. I will post one of their songs this week. So really scratching several different itches depending on the style I was looking for this week. Curious if anything caught your ear as you've been kind of getting through this stuff in 2026.
I have not listened to anything that you just listed, so I have some work to do there, particularly the Evermore album. It's on the list. I will mention, although I'll be honest, I haven't actually had a chance to hear the song yet, but the band Mortemia, which is it's kind of like a side project that is done by Morten Velland, who is the harsh vocalist for Serenia. He used to be in the band Tristania as well. He's a Norwegian artist. He's been making these sessions albums that started during the COVID-19 pandemic with the Pandemic Pandemonium sessions, and had like what I would consider like a who's who of female metal vocalists doing a bunch of songs on here. The first album was all original material with, I think, one cover, but it had Madeleine from Elaine and Marcella Bovio, Alessia Scoletti, Liv Christine, Melissa Bonney, Brittany Slays, Heidi Parvainen, Zora Koch, Katarina Nix. Like, it just a really impressive list of vocalists. And then he followed that up with the COVID Aftermath sessions in 2025, which had some more covers. There's a Madonna cover, there's a Doors cover, and on this one, again, it was more of the same. Federica Lana, Uli Perhonen, Amber Vorveus, Fabian Ernie, Margarita Monet, Marina Lataraka, Nicoletta Rossellini, Capri, just a lot of names that you've probably heard many a times on this podcast. Now he's working on a new album called The Cover Collab Sessions, which the songs are coming out one at a time. And you may recall that we talked about a very interesting cover, which I saw a lot of wildly different opinions on. And it was a cover of Coolio's Gangsta's Paradise. And the singers that he had on this track, there were three singers on this. The two vocalists from which band is it? Nocturna, Rain Still Night, and Grace Darkling doing the clean vocals, and then Diva Satanica, who replaced the I guess what you call the chorus, which was, originally done as a rap. She did it with death vocals, and I thought it was a really cool and original sounding cover, but there were people that thought it was awful. I'll be honest with you. I know you thought it was quite good.
I loved it. I really, because it was just a nice interpretation of a song that everyone knew. Really an iconic song if you go back to the movie. I mean, it wasn't my cup of tea necessarily, but I understand why it was a big deal. I thought it was a really imaginative cover. I liked it a lot, but I can also understood why people probably didn't share that sentiment. Sure.
And so far they've also, he's also done a cover of Like a Hurricane, which is a Neil Young song he did with Diane Van Giersbergen, who happens to be working on her own project that's coming out, one song at a time as well. Aerosmith's Dream On featuring Linda Toni Gran, a cover of Chris Isaak's Wicked Game with Leah, cover of Rolling Stones' Paint It Black with Kristen Starkey. And now the most recent one that was released, that one that I so long-windedly wanted to get to, is a cover of a-ha's Take On Me featuring Marcella, who we spoke to not that long ago, of Stream of Passion fame and Arion fame and all that. So all that to say, I still haven't listened to it yet, but I assume based on the quality of all these other covers that it's very good. So I will report back next week, but I definitely wanted to mention that just because Marcella was a part of it, and I look forward to seeing what other covers come of this project. But so far, I have not. This has been an all-female led vocals project on all the albums thus far. So looking forward to more from that. It's cool hearing these kind of metal style takes on some of these non-metal songs, particularly Gangsta's Paradise, but certainly songs by the Rolling Stones and Neil Young. So cool. That's some cool stuff there. I don't know that I have, I have just a list of stuff that I need to listen to that I haven't yet. Like Armored Saint has a new single. Devin Townsend has a new single I don't think I've had a chance to hear yet. There's another Master Plan song I haven't heard yet, so I have some work to do. It was kind of a crazy week for me, but I'll catch up and report back next week, and should have more to say.
Nice. Well, either way, I haven't really done a great job with the singles myself. I've been just focusing on the albums as they've come out. I was listening to Power Paladin yesterday and just thinking about how jealous I am that you're going to get to see them live in just a few months. That is a really, really awesome power metal album. Probably my favorite power metal album so far this year. Just top to bottom, every song is really good, and it kind of my enjoyment has grown with each listen. So I'm going to keep going back to it until I don't like it anymore because I thought it was that good.
I think they may be my current favorite Icelandic metal band, but I'll have to check and make sure that that's accurate.
There you go. Moving to a band that sounds absolutely, positively nothing like Power Paladin, and that's Pure Reason Revolution. And so I want to just set the stage here because I mentioned last week that my score for this album is a 10 out of 10. It is one of my favorite albums of all time. It is
Did it go down in the last week?
No, if anything, it's probably an 11 now, to be honest with you. It's an album that came out 20 years ago that I've simply not gotten tired of. I've loved this album from the second I heard it, and I've only grown to love it more. I would put it up there with Mindcrime. I would put it up there with Images and Words. An album that you put on one hand in terms of my favorite albums of all time, a consummate desert island disc for me, because of how dense it is and how I continue to hear new things with every time I listen to this album. Just simply put, it just checks off every box for me. Now, I don't know that everyone is going to share that sentiment because it's a little weird, it's a little bit quirky, and its lyrical content is extremely difficult to decipher. I think it leaves a lot to interpretation. But at the end of the day, if I need comfort food, I know you go to Power Quest. I often go to this album because it just kind of calms me down and puts me in the right headspace for whatever I'm about to face in a given day. I wanted to set the table, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. But as I mentioned, this album came out April 10th of 2006. It was produced by Paul Northfield, a gentleman who we've talked about on this podcast in several different iterations. Paul Northfield, you may remember, was the gentleman who was the producer on albums such as Moving Pictures, several other Rush releases, Queensryche's Operation Mindcrime and Empire, Porcupine Tree's In Absentia, Dream Theater's A Dramatic Turn of Events. The man has done some of, if not many, of my favorite albums of all time, and worked with some of my favorite artists of all time, just a who's who. And so when
Osmosis by Ozzy,
that, I mean, come on, man. Like he's done the prog, he's done the rock, he's done the metal. I love the guy's production. And I think this album is phenomenally well produced. So I just wanted to mention him, but the band, it was a 6-piece at the time. Really just a bunch of musicians who I don't think anybody had heard of potentially in 2006 when they burst onto the scene. It's John Courtney on vocals, guitars, bass, keyboards, and a lot of other things. Chloe Alper on vocals and bass, and both of their vocal stylings complement each other very, very well. Andrew Courtney on drums and percussion, James Dobson on backing vocals, bass, keyboards, violin, Gregory Jong on vocals, keyboards, and guitars, and Jamie Wilcox on vocals and guitars. So obviously a lot of vocal harmonies on this disc, as you can tell, because everyone seems to sing, but they all kind of like lent themselves to the different music that you hear on this album in some way, shape, or form. And so with that backdrop, I will also note that there was 2 different album versions that were released. There was a UK or a European pressing of this album. We're going to focus on the American version because it's what I heard and what I heard first. And then there's a second CD that came with the album, which is really the missing tracks and some other B-sides from the UK release. So if you want them all and you can find the 2-disc version of this album, I strongly recommend it. You get the full complement of songs as they came out 20 years ago. And what was also interesting is that it was released on Inside Out in Germany and other places, but in New York and the rest of the US, it was actually put out on Sony Music, which was a huge label, obviously, even at the end of the CD era in 2006 or thereabouts. But with that backdrop, I want to turn it over to you. I know that you had been kind of getting it from both ends of the candle, if you will, with Caleb and I kind of telling you, listen to this, but what would you say your fandom was at going into this week? Obviously, you had been familiar or had heard the album, but I wouldn't say that you were a diehard fan like us. So where did you kind of come in going into this week?
I knew the song Nemos and Tambos for a long, long time. I've listened to it many, many times. I know it inside and out. It's been on Power Hours, probably on your recommendation, if I'm being honest. I think that it was on a playlist that you had made years ago for a coworker where you were trying to like hit all of the different aspects of prog metal and prog rock and power metal. And you were like choosing like one song per band. And it turned into, I think you had said it was started as a playlist. It turned into like a 4-disc set. And so I remember listening to that playlist a lot. I thought it was really good at a time where there were other bands that I needed to familiarize myself with, like Catatonia, for instance, that I just didn't know that well. It made for a really good icebreaker for so many bands for me at the time where I was looking to get back into the scene. And that was one of the songs that I remember really, really liking it. And so when the band eventually reunited, or they had not done anything for almost a decade, and then in 2020 they released an EP, or maybe it was a full-length album, and then they started releasing albums again. They've released 3 albums since 2020. I listened to all 3 of those, and so I was more familiar with the more recent stuff. But this album was always just something that I knew that both you and Caleb were such huge fans of. And honestly, I'm sure just the same as you, I was kind of surprised how long it took for you to choose it, but I guess the time was right. It came out literally 20 years ago, almost to the day when this episode will drop, give or take a couple of weeks. And so I'm glad that you picked a nice anniversary time for it. And I had heard the rest of the songs on the album here and there, and I probably listened to the album a number of times, but it had been a very long time. And so it was exciting to go back to it. And I have to say that, like, almost immediately I was like really hooked into it. I just found it to be a really easy listen for a complicated, a lyrically complicated album. I found it to be, like you said, like a really good way to get into a good headspace. If I was working, I listened to it at the airport this morning. Like, it's just to me, I find it to be very easy to listen to as far as prog rock goes. I think that there's a lot of really good hooks in the choruses. Like, it's really catchy, but at the same time, almost ethereal in certain parts and very atmospheric in parts, but also there's parts that kind of rock. So it does, I think it just does a really nice job of running the gamut of different prog rock sounds. And I love the dichotomy of the 2 vocalists. I think they just go together super well. So yeah, I ended up really having a very easy time listening to this, although I don't know that I'm going to be able to do much in the way of describing anything.
It's
so
hard
I may
to
lean
describe. And so,
yeah, I'm going to lean on you for that part. But
and I know this album so well, yet at the same time, it's so hard for me to even describe it because it's unlike anything I've ever heard. And I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. But first, let me just tell you a little bit about how I got into the album in the first place. I remember seeing it on message boards, people talking about this band and this release. And so as luck would have it, I think I was probably around 2006, maybe 2007. And I was in law school at the time, and I was sick. And I remember going to the doctor for whatever reason because I had to get checked out. I was kind of ill. And on the way home, my mom and I, who happened to be with me for the appointment, we stopped into Tower Records. Don't know why. And I was not feeling great. And I happened to see the album just sitting there. And it was like, I want to say it was $17 or $18.99. Not a cheap album. Obviously, it was 2 discs, but still, I'm like, do I really want to spend the money? I'm a poor law school student, etc. Ultimately, she's like, listen, you don't feel well. Just go buy the album, and then let's just, you'll enjoy it when you get home. So I bought the album. And I remember putting it on, and at the time I had like this big Sony boombox, like the one that everyone had with the 2 detachable speakers. And I used that thing night and day for years and years and years. I think I had like a 3-disc changer in it or something like that. And I put the album on, and I was immediately like captivated by the sound. And I just felt like it was so dense, and the use of the programming, which we'll talk about, but it's not just the musicians, but the programming and the sound effects they use are just infectious. And so I've listened to it. It's almost like my test case for when I want to test out audio equipment, because I know that there's just so much stuff going on. I always go back to this. But I remember when I got the album, I was just immediately captivated, and I listened to it. And I remember going to Prog Power that next year. And I walked up to somebody who's, obviously knows prog music, and that was Ken Golden. I said, do me a favor, Ken. I need an album what else sounds like Pure Reason Revolution's The Dark Third? And he said to me, Pink Floyd. And he's got a very dry sense of humor. And he's not wrong, but there's like really nothing else that sounds like this except for maybe some of the early Pink Floyd stuff. And so I'm still chasing down that high that I got from the first time I heard this album. And I've heard flourishes of this with other artists over the last 20 years, but even the band themselves would go away from this sound in the discs that followed, although I did hear elements of it on their last disc, which had me extremely excited. But this album was almost like I would argue it's the best debut album of all time. I would say that it's one of those albums that it's got something for everyone. It's got poppy flourishes for people that are looking for an easy listen. It's got some metal riffs, some chunky riffs in there if you want your metal fix. And obviously, if you're a prog fan, I think it's going to check off every box for you. But I just remember being so fascinated by it when I first got it. And the fact that I've never found anything that sounds quite like this ever since then.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, the Pink Floyd reference definitely speaks to why Caleb probably enjoyed this, because he is a big Pink Floyd fan. Definitely Porcupine Tree, I hear in there. There's definitely like other classic rock influences, I think, that I can't quite put my finger on. But again, like the word ethereal kept popping into my head, because a lot of the keyboards and stuff almost have kind of like a spacey, like not space as in like you're out in outer space with gamma ray, but like almost spacey, like like you're kind of like almost like floating in a bubble or
like
something
a trippy
like that.
kind
like,
of feel.
Yeah. Yep. And so I found that when listening to it on headphones, it was almost like a totally different perspective of listening to the album, because having your oral sensation just be completely inundated by the sound on this album. I think it's meant to be heard in that sort of way, to really be able to pick up all the little things that are going on, all those little like, keyboard sounds and all of that. I'm going to bring up Sleep Token for the sheer fact that one of the biggest issues I have with that band is that I really don't like the vocalist. Like, and for me, if I don't like the vocals, it's almost like a non-starter. And with this album, the two vocalists, like I mentioned before, they complement each other so well, but their voices have the same ethereal quality that the music does. And so it just perfectly blends all together for this really wonderful proggy marriage. And I was like really tickled to find out that Chloe Alper in 2018 and joined the band James, which most people probably remember from the song Laid, which was like, this bed is on fire with passion and love, and it was like a huge pop hit in, I want to say, the early 90s. I remember hearing it on, if you remember, 92.7 was like a local alternative rock station at one point. And I remember hearing it on that channel, and then Matt Nathanson went on to cover it on one of the American Pie soundtracks, and so like that almost gave it kind of a renaissance in the early 2000s. And so I thought that was really neat that she is now a member of that band since 2018, I believe. I'll be honest, I can't off the top of my head think of any other song by that band, but at the same time, I do know that one song so well. It was a staple at our college parties, because I used to put that cover version on so many mixes that we used to play at parties, and my friend Marsick would make me play the song in the middle of a party while like 5 discs were shuffling, and I'd have to figure out, like, these were unlabeled mix CDs. I wouldn't even know which disc it was on, so I'd have to like search through it all and find the damn song for him just so he could like hear it, at that moment. So just a little sidebar there. I was not expecting to talk about James in this discussion, but it's funny how things work. I mean, the other funny thing too is that you were talking about Paul Northfield. He produced the album that Hole did
Yes.
in 1998, Celebrity Skin. Like, you know, so like we're really kind of, you know, got some alt rock, you know, sidebars here. And this, honestly,
That would be
this
a
list,
fun album to cover, believe it or not. We should talk about that. Maybe we'll wait until 2028 when I think it came out in 98. That would be a fun album to cover.
This list of albums that he produced is insane.
Some
like
of my favorites of all time, no joke.
Yeah.
Maybe two of the top three for me with this and Mindcrime.
Yeah, and then he did Empire also, and like there's just about some Suicidal Tendencies albums. Not sure. I don't think he produced the one we covered, but later on. So yeah, it looks like he has not. This is a selected discography on Wikipedia. The last one is from 2016. I would like to think he's done something since then, but just interesting kind of connections there. Yeah, I'm not even sure what you asked me, but yeah.
Listen, you hit the nail on the head as far as I'm concerned. I'm glad that it wasn't. Well, I'll say it this way. I'm glad that it was an easy listen for you, because I think that it's one of those albums where you can have it on the background and it works, or you could be completely focused on it for 55 minutes and it works. And I think that's part of the beauty of it. It's not distracting, but you can go as deep as you want into the introspective lyrics and just some of the ambient sounds that are like littered throughout this thing. And so with that, I say we get into it, and we start with a song called Aeropause. It's about 5 minutes in length, and it's really, at least for my money, kind of an extended intro, because the first 4 tracks kind of just lead one into the other, which I thought was a cool way to start the album. I loved the spacey effects, especially at the start, and I think that it's just mixed so well with the drums that you can hear every use of the different drums. And then the guitar, I don't even want to call it a riff, but the guitar tone that kind of permeates this entire track is just so simple and easy to listen to. It's just very like warm, I guess is the word I would use, because the guitars and drums complement each other so well in this intro. I could understand if somebody said it was a bit repetitive. I get that. But for me, there's so many little flourishes throughout that just make this like the consummate opening track. There's keys, there's bells, there's chimes. It really does like kind of pique the curiosity of the listener. And that's why I think it makes for a great way to start the album.
I agree with you 100%. And honestly, like, I think that it's so seamlessly leads into Goshen's Remain that it almost feels like like a 10-minute suite that just happens to have a really kind of extensive intro. But I think that it does a really nice job of setting the table in a really, again, like just this really mellow sort of way. There was a review, not necessarily a great review, but there was a line in it from Dave Simpson, and he said, the opening track, Aeropause, is an awesome homage to metal era Pink Floyd. Other beautiful tapestries echo Brian Wilson's Cabin essence. So nice. I feel like the reviewer kind of lost interest in the album after this intro track, so I'm probably not going to pull too much more of his comments.
Well, we can't all be right, so, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a nice way to set things up. But, it's funny because we've talked, many times about the power metal trope of the minute and a half, symphonic, classically styled intro, instrumental intro leading into the bombastic opening metal, like power metal, furious track. And, this is kind of like the prog version of that. And if you're going to do it in the prog way, then your 1.5 minute intro needs to be 5 minutes at least. And then this checks that box. But again, like I said, I think that it, seamlessly, segues into the first, track with vocals on it, Goshen's Remain. But yeah, really nice, again, I'll use the word ethereal, I might say it so many times that it's going to end up on a shirt by the end of next year. But yeah, just a really kind of spacey way to kind of kick things off. As somebody who's not super familiar with Pink Floyd, the little that I am familiar with, I definitely can understand why this song would in particular remind somebody of that, the particularly proggy era, or the proggy-er era of Pink Floyd. I think the entire Pink Floyd era is pretty proggy. But yeah, so yeah, really nice start.
Yeah, I agree. And yes, seamlessly slides right into Goshen's Remains, and you're introduced to Chloe's vocals over the faint sound of a guitar. You used the word ethereal. I wouldn't change that. I would just say it's almost got this dreamlike instrumentation quality through the whole track. What's nice, though, is the chorus is a bit heavier from the riffs right down to the drum beat. So you hear the dichotomy starting to kind of take shape here. The male vocals, John Courtney's vocals, kind of join in. It really just complements Chloe's vocals exceptionally well. I mean, it's like those two sounds were made to be together. The instrumental section is also interesting because they introduce a string section, which is, really doesn't sound cheesy. It sounds like it's meant to be there. It reminds me of some of the stuff on the Bear McCreary album where the strings were just poignantly used and it didn't kind of overtake the melody and the sounds. Some nice drum fills on this track. And then there's the bridge, which almost features like dueling vocals as opposed to complementing vocals, which is kind of cool. Every song on this album, for my money, could be the song of the week. That's how much I love this album. So this is not it, but I'm just saying, like, for me, every song is stellar. Nothing is less than a 10 out of 10 for me. But your thoughts?
I'll make it my song of the week.
Nice.
I just really enjoyed this. I thought for sure Nemos and Tambos was going to be my song of the week only because I was so familiar with it, and I still think it's an outstanding song. But this is the song that just really opened my eyes to the album, and it was well placed towards the beginning of the album for that reason. But the beginning of the song, where it's really just the guitar and Chloe's voice, immediately I'm sucked into this universe, and
no pun intended. We'll get there.
Yeah. The Dark Third is a reference to the time that that humans beings spend asleep. They say humans spend a third of their life asleep, and your eyes are closed, so it's dark. It makes sense. And I was able to find a message board, and there was a post from 2008, so 2 years after this album came out, and this user by the name of Murphy, put what the message board world would consider a dissertation on the what he surmises is the story that's being told here. And I have to say that I feel like this is definitely an open to interpretation kind of album. I read the lyrics like, to quote Knops, I raw dogged the lyrics, and I was like, I am not like that kind of guy who could like really create this universe when, to me, I feel like the lyrics are very, very vague. And I think that's on purpose. So I will pull some quotes from this post here and there. And for anybody that's looking for it, it's on prrambassadors.proboards.com. If you Google search the Dark Third, it's actually like one of the first like things that pop up, because I think a lot of people really appreciated the take on this. And as far as like the song goes, he said, and I should mention, he felt like Aeropause didn't really have any story significance. It was just kind of an intro. And he kind of intros the whole dissertation by saying, I think, or I'm almost sure, or at least have not come upon anything blatantly contrary, that this album has two main characters, a man and a woman, possibly husband and wife because of the existence of a son, but we'll get to that later. So that's kind of like his little intro to the whole thing. And as far as Goshen's Remains goes, he says, I believe, first of all, that this song is told from the woman's perspective, and this is reinforced by the fact that Chloe sings it, but this fact is not something to adhere to for the entirety of the album. The woman is asleep here, and her husband, I presume, is with her, cooling her so bright. The pair are basically just lying in the grass. It's a sunny day, typical dream setting. The husband is soothing her with his smiles. She forgets her worries here. Quote, he leaves my needs over there. Don't get bogged down by confusing lyrical details. I think here and in other songs, they just want you to get the general idea or mood. Here it is that she is dreaming and he is with her, not only in the dream, but I'm also convinced that he's beside her in bed, as we'll see later. Basically, the remainder of the song emphasizes that they are dreaming and that everything is tranquil. The song's the sky's sublime lunation. And then, in brackets, he says the sky is beautifully colored, even past surrealty. And then in brackets, inside those brackets, it says they're dreaming. Duh. So I'll ask you this, as somebody who's listened to this album way more than I have. How do you feel about that? Interpretation of this track?
It really actually made me think about the track in a way that I had never thought about it before, because I've listened to this album countless times with the lyrics, and I still have no idea what it's about. And I'm not sure that I ever did a deep enough dive to try to put the pieces together. So listen, I'll go with that. It's as good of explanation as any. I just got so captivated by the vocal melodies with the songs themselves that it almost didn't matter. They could have been like scatting for all I care. The words didn't matter to me. But with that backdrop, if true, I mean, like really, really awesome, powerful stuff.
Yeah, agreed. Just getting back to the actual, music of it. I love the kind of, and we've talked about this before too, the quiet and loud, back and forth. And they do such a nice job at both. And like, cause you don't really hear very much in the way of drums when it's softer, but then when the music picks up, the drums kick in. And then I love that those strings come in towards the end of the song, and it ends in just a very kind of chill prog rock sort of way. So great tune. I'm bowing out early on my song of the week, but here's Goshen's Remain. I don't know if anybody was from Goshen, New Jersey, or no, Goshen's in New York.
It is in New York.
I
That's
think.
okay.
Yeah. Either way, here it is, and we'll come right back.
I love how the intro of this song just kind of carries the day, because you then see it with the next track, and it's just this continuous flow as we go into Apprentice of the Universe. Verses here are going to feature the male vocals with the accenting backing vocals. Very trippy sounding. I think the chorus of Apprentice is exceptionally melodic and emotional. It really resonates with me. And then when the instrumental section kind of comes through, then the song kind of explodes in its own way. I adore the samples on this track when the tune gets rocking. It really just adds another layer to the sound. It's a short tune. It's only about 4 minutes and 16 seconds, short by way of comparison anyway, but really powerful. Love the chorus. And then even the spacey end of the tune, which leads to the big epic tune that follows. Fantastic tune here again.
The really spacey kind of keyboard sounds that come in right at the beginning reminded me a lot of Richard West's League of Lights side project, which I think we have mentioned in the past, which is interesting too, because he's also from the UK.
I could see that. I could see Richard West being a huge fan of this band, and I'm sure he's probably seen them in London at some point because they play there a lot.
Well, we'll have to ask him next time we speak to him. So that was kind of the vibe that I got, especially with this song. But again, much like the previous track, it does that thing where it's like really like kind of floaty, and then there's sections where it just really like rocks out, but at the same time you have like those really trippy keyboard sounds that almost remind me of when bands in the 60s were experimenting with the Moog synthesizer, like, you know, the Monkees were doing it, and you know, whoever else. And so just like really kind of another wild song, but I really enjoy like the part where he's just like I'm tired and I want to go to sleep. Like just that one line is the way he sings it, and just the just, you know, it's anybody can kind of just with that little snippet could definitely sympathize with the idea of being tired and wanting to go to
know.
sleep.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's an emotional tune, but even that one line really just resonates with me because, like, who hasn't been there?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll continue on with Murphy's thoughts, because you know, he says about this song, as the previous song painted a picture of peace, beauty, and awe, this continues the theme, I believe. However, this is a very tentative discussion, and I have no idea what lime means. Whatever it means, though, lime, dreams, and limpid, absolutely serene and untroubled, according to Merriam-Webster's online dictionary. Dreams are colonizing or gathering together. I do not think this song is told from either the woman or the man's perspective, but from a stereotypical, unbiased, omniscient narrator. He is observing the harmony and order between the alliance, the couple, and the dream world around them. However, I am unsure as to certain seemingly important lines here, such as, quote, "She told me I had too much to dream last night," which is a really clever quote when you think about it, because, like, you know, how many times has somebody been told, you know, you had too much to drink last night, but I don't think anyone's ever said you had too much to dream last night. How the hell would anyone know that? So obviously they're kind of intertwined in this dream world. And so I really like this song a lot as well. And I feel like it made for a really nice follow-up to Goshen's Remain. So, another really strong track as far as I'm concerned.
What's always fascinated me is that this was the big single from the album. It actually peaked in the UK. It came in at number 74 on their charts. I wouldn't have guessed that. And I mean, I guess it makes sense given the length and everything else. But imagine hearing this on like rock radio over in the UK. I just can't imagine it. But obviously it did well for them. I always kind of thought that the big tune on the album was The Bright Ambassadors of Morning, track number 4. Not only is it the longest track at nearly 12 minutes, but it's an album and a theme or song and a theme that they would go back to later on the album. In other words, the melodies of Bright Ambassadors of Morning is something that they would go back to later on in the album. So I always found it to be kind of the cornerstone in many respects. The samples at the beginning of this track absolutely steal the show. It's really kind of an extended 2.5-minute introduction where the percussion really stands out as we get into it. Really eclectic verses with layered vocals, and you're almost waiting for like a big chorus to be a payoff, but it's actually oddly subdued, and it involves just singing the title over and over again. And normally, and I've said this on the podcast, I usually hate it, but for some reason it works for me here. It almost is what it needed to be, and I can't really describe it. You just have to hear it. I always thought the bass stood out as well, especially during the instrumental sections of this track. And then around 8 minutes or 8 minutes and 10 seconds in, the entire track turns upside down in the weirdest way possible. It becomes this bass-driven rocker of a tune, which provides like a hell of a contrast to the first 8 minutes of the track. And even there, the vocal lines remain outstanding. And then it flips again back to what it was at the beginning of the song. It's just brilliantly constructed. Huge fan of the tune, but I'm not going to make it my song of the week.
There's like a part about 6.5 minutes in, before the part where you mentioned where it kind of flips the song on its head. And for whatever reason, it reminded me kind of like, almost like late 90s Pearl Jam, at least
Really?
the guitar parts anyway. I'm trying to think, it's like probably a song off of like Yield or Binaural, where they were kind of experimenting, I think, with kind of more, a little bit more darker, a little bit more proggier kind of stuff. Like, it's very subtle. I'm not telling you that go listen to Bright Ambassadors of Morning and hear Pearl Jam, like, you know, although apparently Chloe and Eddie took a photo together that you sent me earlier, which I thought was super cool, when worlds collide. But there is just a lot happening, and granted, it's an almost 12-minute song, so there should be, but that the part that you mentioned where it kind of starts to rock out, really, it felt like it almost went from like 90s alternative right into like Porcupine Tree.
Yeah.
So definitely some Steven Wilson vibes on this album, and I'm sure there's not a lot of UK prog that doesn't have at least a little bit of Steven Wilson's influence on it. But this is a really nice song, and honestly, I got to be honest, I'm super excited to find out what your song of the week is going to be. But I agree with you that, like, I don't think I would be terribly surprised at anything if you even if you chose Aeroplaws. I'm not even sure I would be that surprised by that. I think every song is really strong and has you know, a lot of just desirable qualities that you want in a song of the week. So yeah, this is for the longest track on the album. I did not find it to be long-winded or boring. And I think that up to this point, you know, we're about, like 25 minutes into the album. I think we're getting a really nice idea of what, this musically, this band is all about. I'll add a little bit more. I'm going to try not to just read all of this, because especially when we get to like Voices in Winter, there is a lot of text here, but some of these earlier tracks have kind of shorter, you know, kind of wrap up. So I'll try to read some of these shorter ones. But for Bright Ambassadors of Morning, he said, I believe the point of view changes yet again here, heading to the man this time. He is possibly remembering a scene. By the way, as I already said, the husband exists not only in her dream, but also exists in his. They are having a communal dream that has passed recently or long ago, more likely recently than not. Apparently he is having a little difficulty, understandably, recalling the exact scene. Quote, it takes a minute to photograph, unquote, to picture what happened. He sees faces, the face of those he had seen before in the skies. Once again, I don't know the exact details, and many of the lyrics are confusing or misleading, but I think he's recalling the murder of his son, quote, lost son. Some may think it would be one of those stretches I was mentioning earlier, but in fact, those are hints about the son later on in the album and in the bonus songs, especially the Twin Sin / Trembling Willows. Although it never says it right out and it is fed to you in fragments, the singer's violent intonation and lyrics, quote, black guns, quote, lions' odors, quote, heavenly bleeds the sun, maybe a pun on sun and sun, but that is probably stretching it, confirm this for me. After the chorus is chanted, it becomes clear that the two are separating, and from the lyrics of the next song, I think he leaves her, but it's not really drastically important who leaves who. Don't get caught up on details. I think the writers were purposely vague and unclear. The point is that they are separated.
Yeah, I can't top that. I'll be honest with you. It's just his analysis is fascinating to me, because he just he's thought about things that I just never really contemplated, if I'm being honest with you. I do, before we move ahead here, though, I want to just kind of mention a quick story I think you'll appreciate. I had the pleasure of seeing this band live in 2007. It's their only New York show, and one of, I think, 2 shows they've ever done in the United States. They went to play Nearfest, which was a progressive rock festival in Pennsylvania over at Lehigh University in 2007. And before they played that festival, they played New York City. And it was, to this day, one of the most fascinating shows that I've ever seen in my life. And you may say, why? Well, I'll tell you why. There were 6 people in the crowd there to see them that day. It was me, it was my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, it was Milton, who people know from Prague Power, and it was three strangers. And there were practically more people on stage than there were in the crowd. But I remember
we probably know the strangers nowadays too. They're probably people we know.
I mean, that's how crazy it was. There were literally 6 people there. They announced them for this club show. It was some club. I think it was like the Mercury Lounge or something like that on Houston Street. Just a small club on the east side of Manhattan. Nobody was there. And I just remember seeing the fact that they were playing, and I couldn't believe it. And when I got there, since there was nobody there, I was like, this is not good. Are they really going to play? But they did. And I remember them rocking out to this song in particular and thinking to myself, this is so cool, and nobody's going to be here, and they're probably never going to play here again, which is a shame. And so when I saw that they were announced for that Prague Storm Festival in Montreal in August, it might be my only chance to ever see them again, which is why I'm making every effort to go up and go to that show as well.
It looks like they played on Cruise to the Edge last year, which I guess is technically considered like a domestic show, even though it's on a boat. Interesting. Like Setlist.fm doesn't even have that show in New York.
Yep.
Like it's not even there. So that's interesting. It looks like they played in at a bar in Philly the night before the Near
kidding.
Fest
I didn't even know about that show. That's cool.
Yeah. And it says here that they played at South by Southwest in 2005.
Wow, in 2005.
At the time, like Dark Third wasn't even out yet. I think all they really would have had to play was from the Cautionary Tales for the Brave EP, which was kind of like a almost a primer for this album.
That's wild. I had no idea, but interesting.
How would you feel if Prague Power booked Pure Reason Revolution to play this album in its entirety?
I have been pushing for that for 20 years. So I'll put that out there.
That would be something that I wouldn't miss for the world. I'll be honest.
I would. So they've been touring this album because of the 20-year anniversary, and I was hoping that they would get announced in Atlanta. Obviously, they did not. But that being said, I have thought heavily about going to Europe to see it. That's how much I love this album. And to know that just what the set list would just be phenomenal. Not that I don't like the newer material. It's all very good, but this one, they just hit it out of the park. And what's interesting.
Well, when it comes to like all-time albums, you kind of want to hear the whole thing, like start to finish.
Yeah.
Like there's not a ton of them, I think. But this definitely sounds like it's one for you, so I totally get it.
And what's interesting is like the first 4 tracks, like I mentioned, are the same as the Euro release. But then you get to Nemos and Tambos, which was the song you mentioned, and I find it interesting because it was not on the European release. It was actually a B-side to the Apprentice of the Universe single, and so that's why it wound up being a B-side there, but being on the album here. And what's interesting about it is, number one, it's the first pause on the album. It's the first time where there's a break of the music as you transition into this tune. I'd argue it's maybe the most accessible tune on the album. Really awesome low-key bass lines and some simple drum patterns, but really catchy verses, a really catchy chorus. No idea what they're singing about, so I'm going to leave that to you. But I love how the song gets progressively heavier with each verse. And then the samples behind it, and you just have this phenomenal tune. And ironically, I think the highlight of the song might even be the bridge, just a really short but killer bridge on this one.
Do you have any like memory of adding this to that playlist back in the day, and
None.
any idea why you would choose this song of all? Maybe just because it's the shortest song on the album.
I think it's the shortest and maybe the most accessible. It's not as far as proggy tunes goes. This is not the proggiest of the tunes, and I think that might be why.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it worked on me because it was kind of my intro to the band, and I just think that it does such a nice job of, again, keeping that kind of spacey and ethereal, verses, but then the chorus really picks up, and it's really like, again, the drums kick in, and it's a really catchy and memorable chorus, in my opinion. And I hear that hide the light in my head, like repeating itself. It's such a memorable, just a memorable part of the song. And it just got me thinking of the video game Hide Light. And then I would start thinking about Hide Light. So maybe I'll have to bust that out on the old arcade machine one of these days. Nice. While listening to the Dark Third. But, I really like the song. I always have, and I have never grown sick of it. I'm gonna probably just stop reading all of this stuff, but I definitely recommend that if you want to read more about like Murphy's kind of theory about what this album is about. There's so much more. I figure I gave you a little bit of a preview of it, but it's too much to read out. I think it would just be boring. It would just be me reading stuff. So it continues on, in this like, dream world between these two people. So definitely, maybe we can even add the link to the post when we post the episode, because it's definitely worth reading, especially if you're a longtime fan of the album like you are, and maybe have struggled with like the meaning behind it all. So, I know, Chris Willenbrock also had mentioned that he is a big fan of this album, and so maybe he can provide us too with some of his thoughts as well. So I'll leave it at that. So thank you, Murphy, wherever you are, for your thoughts from almost 20 years ago. But I if you're just looking for like a taste to see if this is the album for you, I would definitely recommend starting with Nemos and Tambos and then kind of going from there, because I think if you like this song, I think you'll find the rest of the album to be enjoyable.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's why I was kind of surprised that it was a B-side in the UK, because I feel like it would have been well served to put it on the album itself, almost like Ozzy did in Black Sabbath with Paranoid. It was meant to be a B-side, but then it found its way onto the album as probably now their like most well-known track.
I would love to know what the thought process was behind having different track lists, especially when it seems like it's a story. And so like to have different track lists in different regions when it's a story based album is interesting. And I wonder if maybe the story goes in a different direction if you're listening to the UK version. I know it was funny because I remember we talked about this with, what was it? Return to Heaven Denied having a different track list in Japan, and like we asked, I had asked Olaf what that was all about, and he was like, "That was all the record label. I don't know why that happened." So I mean, sometimes these things are out of the artist's control. But having listened to this version, I'm not sure I could really picture it any differently. So
well, I've listened to the UK version. I felt it a little jarring because I was just not used to it. And so I find myself going back to the American version and then listening to the EP that follows. That I would like to do for a bonus episode at some point. So maybe we'll do that in April as a nice companion piece to this. It's only 5 tracks. It's probably about 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes, but something to think about.
Yeah, that sounds lovely.
As we go ahead here to Voices in Winter in the Realms of the Divine, the guitars at the beginning really remind me of Pink Floyd. And I always thought the vocals on this was almost like they were singing to each other, not with each other. Catchy, kedgy, sublime verses. And then the song has this slow build quality to it, almost like an anathema tune, whereas part 2 of the song starts with really prominent string sections, and the vocals have a bit more edge to them as well. And this is a track that, although I've always liked it, really has grown on me a lot over the years, especially as of late.
Again, like, another track that I really just enjoyed. I don't know that we're like really going to go to any new places musically as the album continues. I think we've kind of gotten the idea of what the gist of this is, like, on a macro level. There's a lot of little things going on, I think, that are different, but like
impossible to describe them all. But I would also say that even though at a macro level there's a lot of similarity, I think the songs sound very different from one another when you really start listening to it repeatedly.
Yes, and I definitely picked up on that as I kept listening. I really like I assume that the very almost severe change a little bit after about the 4-minute mark is Voices in Winter moving over to In the Realms of the Divine. Yes. And I really like the In the Realms of the Divine section, only because I think that it really provides some of the heaviest stuff that you're going to hear on the album, and I think actually kind of dips its toe into the prog metal, area. And I just, it also, the tempo speeds up and you're kind of getting to hear both vocalists at the same time. So cool track. Like, I don't know if it was meant to be like two separate tracks and they just combined it into one, because they do really feel like two distinct songs. But as a whole, this whole 6.5 minute package is really nice.
Nice. We forge ahead here to Bullets Domine, and this one always felt like a ballad to me, at least at the beginning. I love the piano and the drums during the verses, very emotional quality to it. The chorus is very calming. It almost has this serene quality to it. The strings, again, are used and really help supplement but don't overpower the melody on this track. But the chorus is really catchy and maybe even better than everything else on this track. I just really like the chorus on Bullets Domine. For whatever reason, the band has kind of moved away from tracks like this. But I would also consider this one another grower before the end of the album, which I think finishes exceptionally strong. But these two tracks in the middle that we just mentioned, they've grown on me a lot throughout the years.
And I can understand why. This is like another track that I think you start to get towards the end and you're like, oh, are they is this going to be like just chill the whole way through? And again, like it definitely has some heavier aspects of it, and I really like the parts where the vocals from Chloe come in. I really enjoy her voice, and I think it really adds to the enjoyment of the album. And like I said before, like the two vocalists, I think, really mesh together well and make a really beautiful, harmony together. And this is another song I liked a lot. But I especially like the end where it just feels like it crescendos and more stuff musically is happening. And it's what's interesting about this album, I think, and this song is a good example of it, is that there's like literal parts of the album where you just don't hear drums. So when you do hear drums, it's almost like a cue to your brain that like things are going to get a little more exciting and a little less ethereal. And so I think that kind of hesitation, that's the wrong word, but just like just that lack of drums in places, I think, was purposely done, I think, to make the drums have more impact when they actually show up. And I think it works brilliantly all throughout the album, but also on this song in particular.
Awesome. I think this album really finishes up very strong. And I'm not sure that it finishes up any stronger than with Arrival, The Attention Craft, the next track. This was another one that was not on the UK release, and it is an absolute shame because this song, for the better part of 10 or 12 years, has been the quintessential track from this band, at least for my money. It is my song of the week. I can't wait to tell you all about it, but let us give it a listen, and then I'll kind of walk you through my rationale for it. The intro here sounds like it's got like electronic drums, and I almost wonder if they used an electronic drum kit for this particular song. But what I love about it is just the combination of the quirky sound samples and the guitars, and of course the strings that play a prominent role yet again. The extended intro is really melodic and really catchy and kind of just sucks you in as that first verse finally starts. But for me, the best part of the song is that bridge. The best on the album for sure, and I'm not sure that it's close. It's a really hard-hitting song. And for whatever reason, I just think that when you have the bridge and the way this particular song ends, it is like PRR at their absolute peak. I love this song. And if memory serves, when I saw them in New York, they ended the show with it, which is, I would mark out to see that show again. Just because I adore this particular tune, but the metal fan in me in particular really gravitates towards this one.
This was one of the songs when I went back to listen to the album, I was like, I remember this song, and it took me a little while, and then it dawned on me that this was a song that Caleb had used on a Power Hour at one point. So I was like, that's why I remember that. And there are some pretty good quality videos from this band on YouTube. As far as they were pro shot, I'm not saying that they are in high definition in any sense of the word, because again, this was stuff that was coming out in 06, 07, but there is some cool live clips out there. Although I'm not 100% sure if the band has ever officially released a DVD or anything that.
They actually released, I think, a couple of DVDs from around 2009, 2010, and I think that's why you see some of that footage. I would love to see those DVDs. I never had them, but maybe it's time I go on eBay and kind of pick them up. I'm sure they're long out of print, but that is why there's some good footage floating around now.
I wonder if Caleb has any of them. I'd have to ask him, but like I had said before, I really had no idea what your song of the week was going to be. I really felt like it could have been anything, and so I'm not surprised that you chose this, but again, I wouldn't have been surprised by any of the tracks. But I like this one a lot too, and I feel like I'm not really going to say anything that I haven't said already, as far as just my general feel of the songs on this album. But again, this is one I really enjoyed, and again, especially the second half of the song where I feel like it kind of picks up a little bit more steam. Probably the last kind of long song on the album. I think the rest of it are kind of reasonably length songs, but I just couldn't imagine a prog fan listening to this album and not loving it.
Yeah, I obviously completely agree with you. I'll tell you a funny story. On my pressing of the album, the next track, he tried to show them Magic and Ambassador's Return, is actually connected to the last track, Asleep Under Eidertown. And I mentioned that because it was really one long track, and the last section, Asleep Under Eidertown, was really kind of a hidden track, almost like you would find on Green Day's Dookie or something like that. Like you waited 3 minutes and then all of a sudden the last song started. So for my money, this is the final track, to say nothing of the fact that Asleep is a very quirky track in and of itself. But as we get to the end here, he tried to show them Magic is this really psychedelic but almost more upbeat tune. And I thought it was kind of a fitting end to the journey here. Really proggy. It's almost like multiple songs in one. And then there's this callback moment to Bright Ambassadors of Morning, the epic that we talked about earlier. It's almost like everything was coming full circle. The difference, though, is when you hear those melodies here, they're faster and heavier and almost want you to bang your head to the music. And I love how you're just able to move to the beat as you hear it again for the first time in about a half an hour.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. I thought it was funny that I always think it's funny when non-90s alt-rock bands do the hidden track thing. It was such a trope in the 90s, and it's fun because there's definitely been metal bands and other bands that have done it over the years. And so I must have separated the tracks years ago as I tended to do. So how do you feel about this being the last track on the UK version and there not being, or is Sleep Under Eiderdown on the UK version as a hidden track, or is it not on that album at all?
It is not. It is not, but I also think it is such an outlier that I've never considered it part of the album proper. It felt like it was tacked on, and like I said, it was a secret track on the US version, really understated tune, and I never really paid much mind to it because it was this add-on, if you will, and I actually rather enjoy it. I just think it actually makes for a perfect end in many respects. I love the bells and the sublime vocals. It's really short and sweet. I just don't know that it's necessary, but it's one of those unnecessary tracks that's awesome. So I have no problem with it, but I always thought that the album kind of ended with Ambassador's Return, and then this was like, I consider it a bonus track, at least in my head.
Yeah, and I think that it does a nice job of kind of being a reprise to the Bright Ambassadors of Morning track, just kind of coming back to that repeated, song title that you mentioned earlier on. I definitely can agree with you that, yeah, it does feel like this is where the album is supposed to come to an end. But that said, I really enjoyed Asleep Under Eider Down, if no other reason that it, I think, kind of had almost like a kind of sleepiness to it. And I thought that made for an interesting way to kind of outro the album. It's almost like a little bit like an outro that was detached from the actual storyline or whatever, but also like I really don't feel like it doesn't fit, because I think the style of the music kind of sticks to what the band has been doing. Although in this case, this is a song where it never picks up. It is a mellow tune from start to finish, but also just has all of those really good, really enjoyable prog elements. Just a very sleepy kind of tune, and I think I like that it was added as a way to kind of end things, or even if the intent was, you're going to take a 5-minute silence break and then come back to this last 3 minutes to kind of take you out. Either way, I liked that. It never felt like a track like, okay, the album's over, I'm just going to skip this. Like it almost felt like a nice come down from the experience, because it really is. It's a fairly meaty album. It's very heavy in as far as like lyrical content goes, and it's a dense album musically, and so I think this is kind of a nice way to kind of just carry out the album in a way that almost feels separate from the album itself, if that makes sense.
It does. So I appreciate that sentiment. And again, I don't think I'm revealing any trade secrets here. This album, even when I listen to it now many times in a given week, as I did this week, it never gets old. I never tire of this album. And that is why, combine that with the fact that I think every song is perfect, that is why it's a 10. That is why it's a Desert Island disc for me, and why I would put it up there with the Mind Crimes of the world. I'm really curious as to what your score is going to be, because it sounds like you liked it even more than you thought you would. But I did worry a little bit, because I thought it was such a dense listen that you would be kind of turned off by it. It is not as immediately accessible as a band like Power Glove or Power Quest or Power Paladin or any of the power metal bands, right? But like, I do appreciate that you gave it a half dozen listens, and I'm curious to see where it lands for you.
I think that with the nostalgia of knowing it for 20 years, it would be higher for me. But that said, I still think it's an 8.5 just because it just was that enjoyable.
That's a really good score.
And I'll tell you what, the reason why I was able to get into it, even though it is a dense album, I think is just because it still had a lot of vocal hooks that to me make the songs memorable and make you want to go back and listen to them again. And so like, I don't think there was one track that I was just kind of like, meh, I really liked all of them. And it really made for a really nice musical journey, but something different. Like I don't want to listen to, fast-paced power metal 100% of the time. Like I like branching out and listening to other things. And when other things really, kind of resonate with me, like this album did, it's exciting. And so it definitely is like one of those albums where I feel like if I didn't listen to it for a year and then I popped it back in this time next year and I was like, oh God, yeah, this was great, I'd probably give this one like an 8.75. And it's like each time you listen to it with the power of nostalgia, it gets a little bit better, bit better. But really outstanding album. And I completely understand why, this would be a 10 for you, especially knowing what your proclivities are musically. There's a really, really nice review that is on metalstorm.net, and the review is by Jeff. It just says Jeff. So Jeff, I am quoting you. I said I would, if I knew what your last name was, or if your first name really is Jeff, I don't know. But anyway, he had some really nice things to say about this album. And I probably should have led with this, but here we are. He said, if you want to understand how the music of Pure Reason Revolution sounds, you'll have to imagine a mix of Pink Floyd. I'm talking of the atmospheric but technical moments that we can find in the music of the British Monsters, with pop rock, a bit like with the Gathering album, which at the time of his review would have been in 2007, and some metal stuff with some cool riffs. Let's add a nice female vocalist with a really beautiful voice, and now you're able to imagine a bit the music of this really original band. It's soft in general, except with sometimes some sounds which are not so far of metal, but we're more into prog rock than anything else. It's not a problem because it's cool to listen to this peaceful music, and the voice of the singer is so cool that it's a real pleasure to listen to this album. And he goes on to say, we're in front of something really great here, a nice surprise to me in England. If you like pop, if you like rock, if you like metal, and of course if you like progressive music, the Dark Third is for you. Fresh and lovely. The first album of Pure Reason Revolution will give you a lot of good feelings. Something great is born this year, my friends.
I think that is the perfect way to put a bow on this episode. I love it. I think that it's just a really great description, and I agree with all of it. So I'm glad you read that. I'm glad you found it. And that's it. Like I said, I was really happy that we got to cover this. So I think we should cover the EP or the other tracks to go along with it. I think that'll make for a nice companion piece to this episode. So let's do that in April, shall we?
Absolutely.
Very good. Some news items that I'd be remiss not to mention. The first is that longtime Manowar guitar player Ross the Boss Friedman has passed away at the age of 72 from Lou Gehrig's disease. I mention it because we had covered Kings of Metal last week, and that was his last album with the band. So kind of some unfortunate timing there. They had announced he was sick about a month ago, and unfortunately he has passed away. I know he's a very polarizing figure in many respects, but he is a figure that is definitely part of the American metal mainstream for his work on those early Manowar albums. So again, Ross the Boss Friedman passed away at the age of 72. And some other disappointing news. Nevermore has been forced to pull out of Prog Power USA due to issues with their singer and visa issues there. Well, let me just say a couple of things. I know this is very disappointing to a lot of people. I'm not looking to tell trade secrets or reveal why or how or anything like that. What I'm saying is this band will absolutely grace the stage of Prog Power at some point in the near future. I guarantee you that. This is a band that should be one of the headliners at the festival. I know a lot of people are really upset by the fact that they won't be playing. I am one of them. But such is the state of affairs at this point in terms of getting foreign acts, namely the singer of Visa, in this climate. So I hope that we get to see them very, very soon. I have no doubt that they are looking to tour the U.S. as well. So all in a matter of time. And let's hope that the replacement is a good one, because they have a 90-minute slot to fill, and it is a blow to the festival that they are not playing.
Yeah, there's 2 huge slots that are currently still yet to be filled at the festival. I very much hope, but would never bet that there's not going to be any more casualties. It just has become, unfortunately, a normal thing. And especially since the festival has expanded into 4 days and 20 plus bands, that just means there's more opportunities for there to be fallout. And what makes the festival so great from day one was being able to bring over mainly European acts that would not be able to come to the US otherwise. And I think that there's still, there's bands that to this day literally have played at Prague Power and have never played a show in the US otherwise. Bands as big as Pretty Maids are on that list. I mean, if you don't count 70,000 Tons, like Pretty Maids has played one show in the United States ever, and it was at Prague Power USA, and we were both on the floor for that. And
losing our minds, mind you.
Losing our minds. That is what makes Prague Power such a magical festival, and so it's even more of a face palm when a band that's based domestically can't play because of visa issues, because they happen to have a member of the band who's not from the U.S.
And musicians that are like established musicians. Jeff Loomis has toured the world. Van Williams has toured the world, not only with Nevermore, but with other artists as well. So it is a real head scratcher. But like at the same time, I understand not wanting to risk anything, because the band does have plans to play here, and they got to get this singer over here, not only in the years to come, but for many, many years to come, right? So like it makes sense, but it doesn't. Like you said,
but also trying to find logic in why these decisions are made by that was a USCIS.
Yes.
There's never been a solution to that mystery. There's a line from the movie Clueless that always made me laugh. I'm going to look it up just so I don't screw it up, but the line is, searching for a boy in high school is as useless as searching for meaning in a Pauly Shore movie. And so I feel that way about searching for any sort of logic coming from the government as far as why they decide who gets to come here and who doesn't. Really is pointless, because I don't even think they have a real actual guideline or that they go by.
No,
it's
to say it's an arbitrary and capricious standard would be an understatement.
Yes, good word, capricious.
Thank you. Word. That may never use it properly again, but at least I got
Lugubrious.
It for this one. So that's a little bit of news, and then I just want to swing over to next week, because it is the first episode of the month. It is a request. It's a band that we've not covered, and it's a band that admittedly I have struggled with for many years. I really liked one of their albums, and I never got into anything else by the band, although I never really gave it a fair shot. So at least I can say that I'm going to do that this week. It is a band that you like, I think, considerably more than I do, generally speaking. The band is Therion. The album we're covering is their 1998 release, Vovin, which probably was their best-selling album, I think. So it is maybe their biggest release, and it's an album that I just wasn't familiar with until I saw it coming up on our to-do list. So I think it's going to make for an interesting discussion, because they're a really interesting band. They've had 1 million members that have come in and out. This particular album obviously sold very, very well. It was their 7th release, and I'm happy to say that I'm going to finally give them a fair shot, because I don't know that I really have much in the past.
I'm curious as to which of their albums you did like.
I will mention it when we.
Oh, making me wait. All right.
Listen, there is one, and I'll tell you. I can't even tell you why. I really should go back and listen to it again. I'm not really trying to be quiet. It was Gothic Kabbalah in 2007. I thought that album was really good.
I enjoyed that one quite a bit too, especially because if memory serves, it had Mats Levin on vocals of of Candlemass and Yngwie and At Vance fame. So yes, I remember actually listening to that album with Caleb, driving back from or to New York for a concert.
Nice.
And really enjoying that one. But yeah, thanks to Brian Hewler for this request. Just as a little vague preview of April, happens to be a month where I have 2 albums that I'm choosing. 2 albums that came 3 years apart that I am a big fan of, that are nothing alike.
Nice.
So I'm looking forward to discussing both. One is an anniversary. One is just because it was time. You have one album that happens to fall on 420, so maybe we'll take a couple edibles and see what you have in store for us that week. But yeah, looking forward to April and kicking things off with Therion.
Awesome. Love it. Appreciate everyone for listening. Give us a like and a follow if you like what you hear. Consider joining our Patreon for all this and more bonus episodes and whatnot. And we will come back next week when we go to Sweden and listen to some Therion.
Speaking of bonus episodes, let's just quickly mention that we will be recording our next bonus episode pretty much later the day that this episode drops, and we are going to continue our series of discussing really the history of Prague Power, or our history of attending Prague Power. More specifically, we discussed the first 10 last year, I believe. We're going to discuss the next 5 this time around, just because now we're getting into the point where I actually am attending the festival with you every year, and we were both attending all 5 of 11 through 15, so we'll delve into those. So that'll be the very late released March bonus episode. But at some point we're gonna have put it all together and have kind of the history of the festival all wrapped up in one tidy package.
Love it. Enjoy the week, my friend. Stay healthy, and I will check back in with you very, very soon.
All right, buddy. Take care.